Well, hello there. The huggable, lovable, unfortunately untouchable, but admittedly slightly maniacal Big Bear StarCraft 2, and it is actually not unfortunate that I am untouchable. It is actually extremely fortunate because while I was walking home today, from Subway, which is amazing, I would support and sponsor Subway for free, like I am now. I love Subway. Anyways, I almost did get hit by a car. And Oregon drivers I thought were good drivers, but apparently not. The guy tries to hit me. I think he knows who I am and he does not like me and he tried to hit me. And then he rolls down his window, calls me an a-hole, and tells me that I seriously need to get the F out of his way. I did not take it personal though, because I am sure that he was having a terrible day. You know, if your girlfriend does break up with you or something crazy like that, it is understandable as to why maybe you would be so frustrated. And regardless of the fact I am actually still alive, I do have both of my legs, luckily enough, because I was kind of worried that I would in fact die. I really like this by Liquid TLO. Why not put your supply depot right in your mineral line when you can just lower it anyways? Anyhow, Liquid TLO being the blue Terran player spawning in the top left position, and we have Justify, the red Protoss spawning in the top right. I do not know much about Justify. I think he's a newer player. And I think you're really starting to kind of see the shift. You don't really hear much about White Raw anymore. I think he may have quit. I'm not entirely sure. But like I was saying, you don't really see much of White Raw. He doesn't really like releasing his replays. He likes to keep it kind of private. But regardless of the fact, you haven't really seen much of White Raw lately, have you? No, you have not. I haven't seen much of White Raw, to be honest. Really, it's kind of Kiwi Cocky and the newer players that are kind of taking over. And then you have people like White Raw who are kind of starting to take a back seat, I believe. And I mean, Liquid TLO is kind of one of those original players. He loves to play extremely risky. Like you can see, he's getting a command center on 15 before any sort of Rax play or anything like that. I mean, it's just kind of those little tiny risks that he does that make him so much fun to watch, because when they do work, they work extremely well. You've seen Liquid TLO, if you have in fact watched some of my earlier games, you'll see him use a lot of defensive nukes, or tactical nukes, as a lot of people like to say, and that is simply just a nuclear bomb that you do put down in front of a Protoss army or on top of a Protoss army, and that forces him to kind of move his army back because he doesn't want to engage there, and it really allows you to stim your units in and really attack his units, and then you can just cancel the nuke at the last second so it does not actually drop, or you can just kind of use it to push back the army while you are trying to get your army situated in the right position, and TLO is just going to follow this probe all the way back to homeland. I think that's a smart little play by TLO. It's just opting to just get 2 Raxes. I think that the Protoss player did in fact scout this. If we go to the 1 cam, get out of camera cam. Yep, he did scout that, so he has 2 choices. He's either going to expand right now, as in right now, or he will throw down 2 or 3 more gateways and he will push TLO and hope that he can beat TLO in the early game, because you are at a huge disadvantage when the other player does throw down an earlier expansion, and that's really your only 2 choices. You can either get down to Nexus and get a faster 3rd expansion than him, or just put on a lot of early pressure, which I think that it looks like Justify will be opting to put on a lot of early pressure. So it's really up to TLO to be blocking this off. He should really be getting a couple of bunkers. I mean, he should be getting maybe like 1 or 2 bunkers here, because he should really be expecting some sort of early pressure by Justify if he does not see an early expansion be thrown down here. And I think that it looks like Justify is just going to go to Gateway into fast expansion. You can see that this is pre 1.3.3.3, so the warp gate technology does not take longer to finish. So that kind of deters any sort of 4-gate play. But instead, you're still seeing Justify go for that popular post, or where we are now after 1.3.3. A lot of players have been going for a 1-gate robo build because the warp gate takes so long to build. They say, well, if you want to nerf my warp gate, I will just get a fast robotics bay and try to get out faster Colossus. I really kind of like that tech switch by Protoss, and I think he'll be throwing down a robotics bay pretty soon here, but I'm not entirely sure. You know, it's kind of hard to deal with this when you kind of have to switch up your build to accommodate the other player. I do not think he was actually planning on going for a 2-gate expansion, but he is kind of a little bit behind, so he had to either expand or put on the pressure, and I don't think he wanted to put pressure onto a Terran player who can just throw down a ridiculous amount of bunkers and just repair them massively. So he just did decide to go for the expansion, and now he has to play catch-up, which means that he's going to be throwing a lot of chrono boosts on both of his Nexuses, and that will allow him to get out his workers faster. But Terran has mules, and mules do compensate for 4 to 5 workers. I do not know if you guys have heard me say that a lot, but that is why Terran players are starting to realize, hey, I can pull 4 or 5 SCVs off of an early push and still be at the exact same spot that a Protoss player is. Even if I do lose those SCVs, I will still be relatively same income because those SCVs, I mean these mules do compensate, especially when TLO did go for an earlier expansion. And we'll kind of see what he does decide to do as the Protoss player, but TLO extremely good at scouting the observer, and I think that Justify did do his homework on TLO. He knows that TLO is really good, and look at this, just scanning, and I do not think this observer will get away. See you, observer, you are going to fall into pieces, because I do not think an observer goes to Ire, considering it is just simply a robot. Justify really just wants to have a probe here guarding the Nexus, and he really just wants to kind of make sure, excuse me, I had to swallow, jeez. He just really wants to make sure that there's always one guy here guarding the entrance to this Nexus, because he does not want anyone who is not allowed to come into this Nexus to come in. This is kind of like the bodyguard for this Nexus, I am sure. While I am blabbering away, though, we do have a 4th barracks on the way, +1 for his infantry, and just kind of bunkering up, kind of content to macro. And the later the game gets into development, as in not the game itself, but the players who are playing it, they're starting to understand their subtle timings more, starting to understand what kind of builds go well, and you can see that actually TLO is going for Reaper drops. We will see those in a couple of seconds. But as the players kind of get into later and later games and they kind of get their timings a little bit more solid, you start to notice that the players just kind of like get the game into later game, and somehow he sees it, Gosu game sense, but these Reapers will just one-shot these probes and just getting 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 worker kills, I think. So that was extremely 10 worker kills. That was extremely costly. Oh goodness gracious, no, there we go. If we go to the income tab, we can see that that really did hurt the Protoss player a lot. You never want to lose 10 probes in the mid game. That was an extremely effective attack by TLO. And that was a smart play choice, because this map is really ramp heavy with a lot of walls. Like here, for example, you can't really do anything on this wall to chase down a Reaper after he hops down it and runs away, or hops up it. This is really going to force Justify to kind of keep some stalkers here, because now he's going to be kind of worried about the massive Reaper play. If I was Justify, I really wouldn't be too worried. Most Terran players do kind of just get 1 or 2 Reapers, and that is it the entire game. They just kind of use them because they're there, they're fast units, and they can kind of force a Protoss player to be a little bit uncomfortable with leaving his base, which is something you really want to do, because it allows you to retain map control without actually having to hold the middle of the map, which is really nice, because whenever you have map control and you have the Protoss player scared sitting in the middle of his map, that is always a good thing. The Protoss player will in fact see this push coming, because he will be holding the Zelnaga Watchtower. I don't really know what Justify is doing. He's a little bit off of his game today. Maybe this is just a bad day for him, because he should have run that stalker back to base, and he would have had an extra stalker in this engagement. And TLO opting to get a ninja expansion. I'm saying ninja because it is so far away from his base, and if the Colossus climb up here, they can really pick it off pretty easily. And if he does decide to get blink, it's kind of hard to deal with as a Terran Marine Marauder medvac ball. If I was the Terran player, I would really be getting some sort of Viking play. But let's go to the Protoss for a second. You can see that the Protoss is really doing an amazing job of catching up. If you want to catch up as a Protoss player, you definitely should be getting that massive Colossus ball at 12 minutes to have 4 Colossus. That's extremely good, and TLO is reacting the right way by getting Vikings. You can see that in the production tab. But the Protoss player is really just kind of doing a good job of massing up that Protoss ball that you can get off of a lot of gateways, off of a lot of Colossus. And this is probably one of the better times to push before the Terran player does have Vikings. And, you know, TLO will actually just have to opt to move out of there before he can get maybe 6 Vikings out on the field, and that will really kind of push the tide into the Terran's player. And here comes the push. Sorry, I had to swallow again. Darn spit and darn saliva forces me to swallow, which means I cannot cast at high speeds all the time, and actually choosing to push in here. Amazing flank by the Vikings. All the stalkers are going to have to pull back, and this is when they should stim and really run it. This is when they do it, and here you go. He's flanking the army beautifully with these Vikings. This is excellent tactical gameplay, and that is something I love about TLO, is that his tactical positioning is just perfect, spot on. It still was not enough, however. He will take out that last Colossus, and with that, the Marines and the Marauders are just so cost effective, actually pulling all of the SCVs off of the line, So he's really kind of going to lose a lot of workers. If you go to the workers lost count station, you can see 28 workers lost. That is a huge deficit, and this was a huge miss rally. Huge miss rally, and that will actually turn the tide of this because Marines and Marauders, especially Marauders, kind of really just decimate Stalkers and Zealots and any sort of really like gateway unit. Marauders just crush them, and this is what you'll see is you'll just see these Marauders just destroy these units, because these units are 0-0 and TLOs are 1-1. And I mean, even though he almost has double the amount of, goodness gracious, although he almost has double the amount of Stalkers and Zealots that the Terran player has Marines and Marauders, the 1-1 really does turn the tide of the battle. And I do not think that the Protest player knows that TLO has a third base up here, just kind of mining orbitals, and I don't think he'll scout. I think he's just simply going to scout here to see this, and I don't think he'll actually kind of scout up here. I think he's just content with scouting just this base to see. And look at that, TLO's ninja expansion really paying off for itself with that little maneuver. He would have lost it if Justify had in fact been sitting outside of his base. Justify opting to not get any more Stalkers. I mean, any more Colossus, excuse me. Obviously, he has more Stalkers. He's just going to go off of a pure gateway army. I don't know if I agree with this. A couple more Stalkers could really just kind of decimate this army much, much quicker, especially if it's content with sitting on this ramp here. The splash damage is so quick. Opting to actually lift this off. Here comes the giant battle. TLO is kind of in a bad spot by pushing on this ramp because there is such a concave by these Stalkers you can see, and he's actually pushing back the army, but he has to lift off that